Oraro and Company Advocates. My name is Zahra Omar, and welcome to OCO Roundtable. Today I am here with Cindy Oraro. Cindy is a partner at the firm with over 12 years of experience, specializing in energy amongst various other areas of the law. She has advised local and international clients in various matters, including renewable energy, oil, and gas. Welcome, Cindy, and thank you for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we are going to be discussing a socio-legal topic and something that I believe to be particularly important. That is women and energy. And who better to do that with other than Cindy? I want to start off with some context here. The energy sector is one that is in the past been characterized as a male-dominated sector. This position is, however, fast changing, with more women making breakthroughs in the sector and working to create a place for themselves. Cindy, can you tell me a little more about the background to women and energy?
Well, let's start off with the fact that 75% of the 1.5 billion world's poorest inhabitants are women. They lack the freedom to choose the energy they access or use in their daily lives, which makes them energy poor. In Kenya, 77% of the population is thought to be without access to electricity. According to past publications of the Kenya Integrated Household Budget Survey, traditional fuels, including wood and charcoal, are used by over 85% of the population. In rural households, kerosene accounts for 2% of energy use and crop leftovers for 5%. Petroleum and electricity are the two main sources of energy in Kenya, with wood fuel meeting the fundamental needs of the rural poor as well as the urban poor and the informal sector.
Wow, and those are quite alarming statistics, which begs the question, because women have been the biggest energy consumers, wouldn't they be significant assets for business owners or even energy producers because they have a direct understanding of the market's wants, which is what producers should be aiming to satisfy?
Yes, and there are many reasons attributed to the gender disparity across the energy sector. Let's start off with household energy and rural electrification. Time poverty due to fuel collection and cooking, gender-based violence related to fuel collection, health impacts, as well as women and children disproportionately affected by indoor air pollution, and the lack of access to information and financing for energy services and technologies can largely serve as a source of this disparity. Also, generation, transmission, and distribution displacement, inequity in ownership or land titling during resettlement, inequitable access to new jobs in areas such as energy, engineering, tourism, or services, as well as inequitable benefit sharing due to lack of land titles or government identification. I mentioned earlier gender-based violence, but here we would consider gender-based violence related to migration, new roadways and traffic patterns, and exposure mostly affecting men to hazardous working conditions on energy infrastructure projects such as electrical wiring and chemical handling.
I see. There also seems to be a lack of awareness more generally, where women just don't have the necessary information on new technologies that can create opportunities for employment and training, and hence make decisions on certain energy options and electricity use.
Certainly.
Thank you, Cindy. And I want us to branch off a little bit and now talk about the role of women in the energy sector. Clearly, from what we have discussed so far, they perform a very crucial role. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Women are involved in energy or the energy sector on three levels. The first is from a technical perspective. Here, women work as engineers, scientists, researchers, renewable energy specialists, and managers in various categories in the industry. And then there would be the business level. And here they're empowered to run small-scale renewable energy plants, as well as distribution and transmission units, mostly as part of the state-owned bodies who are predominantly participating in the sector. But we've also seen women act as entrepreneurs in the sector, establishing startups and businesses that serve various needs across the energy sector, driving innovation and bringing fresh perspectives to the industry. So I'll also talk about, critically, the role of women as policymakers and analysts. women have been involved in shaping energy policy and regulation at the governmental and organizational level. They contribute to making decisions that impact the energy sector's development and environmental sustainability. So indeed, the energy sector has more gender diversity, especially on boards and in other leadership positions, which has tangible financial and non-financial benefits for business, such as increased profitability and innovation.
Interesting. And this really draws into the topic of affirmative action. Kenya has not lagged behind in efforts to advance women's empowerment and ensure gender equality. I know that the law mandates gender equality in employment and procurement, a practice that the business sector is quickly embracing as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the public sector in Kenya has done to advance women in energy?
Well, the government has taken the lead in promoting the inclusion of women in the energy sector through the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum. This has been done through a movement known as Women in Energy, which has developed to the point where there is now an annual award for women working in the energy sector, which the ministry has been extremely eager to support. Critically, the government is dedicated to ensuring that women can participate in and be involved in the energy sector through programs like the Access to Government Procurement (AGPO) and through adherence to the 2/3 gender guideline. The Ministry of Energy and Petroleum has emphasized the significance of women using the platform set up by the government to reclaim their place in the energy sector. In addition, we must note that the Women in Energy Enterprises in Kenya WEEK project, which is being carried out by Practical Action in collaboration with Sustainable Community Development Services, otherwise known as ESCODE, aims to establish and grow enterprises in the markets for improved cook stoves, solar goods, and biomass briquettes. Social inclusion is essential to achieving equitable economic development and better service delivery across all economic sectors in a primarily male-dominated industry. Women are promoting the advantages of using renewable energy, where women-led businesses in the energy sector, which include Strauss Energy, which is a solar energy company, PowerGen, which is also solar energy, Village Industrial Power, which harnesses steam, Kisagao Tree Farm, which produces briquettes, and Takamoto, which capitalizes on biogas, as well as other platforms created exclusively for women and energy. I think it's important for us to note that there are also organizations like WISE, which is Women Working in Renewable Energy in Kenya, and WISE builds the technical capacity of eligible women to provide high-quality solar photovoltaic systems in the East African region through technical training and mentoring, and therefore providing hands-on installation experience and fostering business spirit to transform them into successful entrepreneurs. There are a number of others. Power Africa's Women in Africa Power Network supports the participation and advancement of women in Africa's energy sector. The Association for Women in Energy and Extractives in Kenya, AWAKE, which is for women in both the energy and extractive sectors, as well as mining and oil and gas. There's also the International Network on Gender and Sustainable Energy, as well as the African Development Bank's managed Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, and many more.
That is incredible. The argument in favor of women working in the energy sector is seemingly so strong and compelling. It's pretty clear that there is potential in the energy sector, and now all that is needed is to develop a plan to fully capitalize on these opportunities, which brings me to my next question. What are some of these strategies and policy frameworks on women in energy in Kenya?
Let's start with the one we hear about quite a lot, which is Kenya's Vision 2030, but we must discuss it alongside Kenya's Constitution of 2010. Kenya's Vision 2030 was introduced in 2008 with the goal of transforming the nation into a highly developed, successful, and globally competitive economy. The 2010 Kenyan Constitution provides rules and standards for attaining social, economic, and political development in the nation. One of the pillars of the government's economic development plan is the requirement to provide adequate and affordable energy. So following on from that, Kenya's energy sector has gone through various waves of regulatory reform and culminating in the Energy Act of 2019, Well, this act establishes the primary legal and regulatory framework for energy in the nation, with the function of the government being policy formation, management, and coordination. Kenya's Energy Act has as its goal the improvement and growth of infrastructure, the promotion of energy efficiency and conservation, as well as the mobilization of financial resources for the expansion of services to meet demand. Also, there is the aim of cost-effective diversification of supply sources and the improvement of universal access to energy.
Wow, so we're seeing a lot of what is going on locally within our borders, and it's quite evident that this is a topic that has gained and continues to gain a lot of traction. And now that we've talked about the local space, I want us to hear a little bit more about the international space. For instance, I know that one of the Sustainable Development Goals aims to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. So there's an emphasis of all there. The goal recognizes the importance of gender equality and women's empowerment in achieving universal access to energy. What else is there in the international framework that supports the promotion of women in energy?
I'll start off with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. This recognizes the importance of gender mainstreaming and the role of women in climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, including those related to the energy sector. Secondly, there's the Clean Energy Education and Empowerment C3E initiative. C3E, led by the Clean Energy Ministerial CEM, seeks to advance the participation of women in the clean energy sector by recognizing their achievements and promoting leadership and career development opportunities. Next, there's the Gender Equality for Climate Change Opportunities, GECO. GECO is an initiative by the International Union for Conservation of Nature that promotes gender equality in climate change, mitigation, and adaptation efforts, including in the energy sector. Next, we have the Global Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves, GAC. Well, the GAC aims to address the health and environmental impacts of traditional cook stoves by promoting clean and efficient cooking solutions. It recognizes the importance of women's involvement in the adoption and dissemination of clean cook stoves. I'll also speak about the African Women in Energy Development Initiative, AWADI. AWADI is an initiative focused on increasing women's participation in Africa's energy sector through training, mentorship, and advocacy for gender-responsive policies. We may have mentioned Energia earlier, which is the International Network on Gender and Sustainable Energy. Energia is an international network that advocates for gender-responsive energy policies and projects, aiming to enhance women's role in the sustainable energy sector. Next, we'll touch on Women in Wind Global Leadership Program, which is led by the Global Wind Energy Council. This program aims to promote women's leadership and career development in the wind energy sector. I'll mention two others, which are number one, Powering Equality. This initiative, supported by USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development, works to increase women's participation and leadership in the energy sector in sub-Saharan Africa. And then lastly, the UN's Fourth World Conference on Women. The conference's main focus was on achieving the full and equal participation of women in all aspects of life, including political, economic, social, and cultural spheres. The outcome of the Beijing conference was the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This platform provided a roadmap for governments, organizations, and individuals to promote gender equality and women's empowerment through strategic actions in 12 critical areas of concern.
Wow. So clearly there's so much happening in the international space and something that perhaps we can borrow from. I think what I've noticed that there seems to be a general consensus about why this particular area needs to be given a lot of importance. And this is manifested through various platforms, initiatives, and international agreements. So as we conclude, and having looked at the challenges that women particularly face in this sector, I want to know what are some of your recommendations, Cindy, in this area and how we can, continue to advance the role of women in the energy sector.
Well, firstly, information is power, and data is key to closing gender gaps in the energy access quest, not just in Kenya, but continentally and probably even globally. So access to key data on how some of the greatest challenges we face can be addressed is critical. The next is access to electricity, which can support women's economic empowerment by facilitating not just the creation and expansion of business, but also employment opportunities. Next is building a cohesive, strong, and multi-stakeholder movement on gender social inclusion. And this includes women's empowerment through the use of sustainable energy. It's also important for there to be platforms that bring together diverse actors and elevate the profiles of locally grounded individuals and groups. It's also critical to promote and invest in decentralized sustainable energy technologies that support gender equality and women's economic development. Governments should raise their efforts to promote women-centric business models for expanding energy access for all. In addition, it is also important to utilize the efforts of women's networks, particularly women entrepreneurs and civil society groups who are tackling the provision of energy services, the elimination of poverty, and particularly energy poverty, and gender equality at the same time. We can also increase the ability of organizations working on women-centric business models to grow their technical, business, and leadership abilities, as well as their advocacy capacity, with a focus on raising the status of women to become leaders at all levels. By creating financing tools, methods, and tailored loan products for women, such as microlending and mobile banking to increase women's access to finance, it is possible to catalyze the growth of businesses run by women in the energy sector. I'll mention just a few others. We can also ensure that energy and the energy sector policies highlight the challenge of gender equality and include a visible commitment to addressing it. In addition, we can mobilize and commit funding for gender and energy programs and activities within organizations and businesses for research, pilot activities, and capacity building. What are some of the other ways that we can bridge the gap? And one of them would be to address gender-sensitive targets.
Thanks, Cindy. Those are such important considerations that we must take into account, because governments must step up their efforts to support female-centric business models for extending energy access to all. And this can be, through capacity building, partnerships with local stakeholders, extending women's access to finance, and just generally creating an environment that is supportive of female entrepreneurs. Do you have anything else to add on to that?
Well, to encourage gender equality and women's economic empowerment, we can promote and invest more in clean cooking and decentralized sustainable energy technologies that include women in the development and distribution of contemporary energy products and services. Barriers to women executives, entrepreneurs, and employees must be removed within the energy sector itself, and their presence on national and international energy bodies should be encouraged to increase over time. International and national energy and climate change programs, as well as mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund and the nationally determined contributions relating to greenhouse gas emissions, must be supported to meaningfully integrate gender concerns in programming.
And that marks the end of today's episode. Thank you very much, Cindy, for sharing your knowledge in this area and, contributing to this valuable discussion. It's really, really important that we continue to have these conversations. And personally, I'm inspired by the way you take this energy sector by storm and your passion in supporting women rise in this particular area. So I really, really look forward to seeing the advancements manifest.
This has been a delightful conversation. Thank you very much for having me.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and found it useful, please tune in to our next episode, which will be streamed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thank you.